what they were this morning. However, the problem is the pressure continues to drop, and that is a sign when you see pressure dropping of a strengthening system. So this is what we're looking at now, and we're literally just got on this information a few minutes ago. A couple of changes here. One of them is the increase in the forecast speeds from the Hurricane Center at landfall. So the eye wall, just reading the report here from the Hurricane Center, has a 5 nautical mile diameter, which is tiny, right? And then there's an outer eye wall at 25 miles, and you may hear about eye wall replacement centers, not centers. Eye wall replacement is a process during storms when they weaken, strengthen, and it's a very normal process of a hurricane development. But with pressure down to 986, it is strengthening here, and one reason that the stronger winds, because we've got this eye wall replacement cycle going on, the winds haven't yet translated from the pressure drop, but they are likely to be increasing there. Storm's still moving northwest, and then we expect it to make more of a jog to the west. Warm water, not a lot of wind shear, which means the winds, as you go up in the atmosphere, aren't too strong, so the storms can grow and spin as opposed to the winds ripping them apart. So that is one reason the storm is expected to strengthen. And we could also get one of those rapid strengthening where it really deepens big time. Sort of like, when you hear cyclogenesis, bombogenesis, when we talk about those meteorological bombs in the winter, they intensify rapidly. Hurricanes also can do that. Obviously, it's somewhat different structure behind that. And probably becomes a Cat 3 tomorrow and stays really dangerous right through landfall here, and that's a big problem, whether it heads toward the Bahamas first or miss the Bahamas, but it's likely going to hit Florida. So let me try to take any of your questions in a minute. I just want to go through the basics here. So there's Dorian, and we can look at, it's getting away from the radar right now, so that's why we're looking at the satellite imagery. There's a little eye there. I know the icon is obscuring that, but let me show you what's going on. So winds 85, pressure down to 986 millibars. And don't worry if you don't understand millibars. You probably understand inches of mercury, but millibar is just another way we measure pressure. And when it gets lower and lower, the stronger the storm. I've seen some modeling that has the storm maybe in the 940s. Right now it's in the 980s. 940s would be 130, 140 plus winds at landfall. That's normally what they correlate to. Obviously, depending on the size of the storm and the pressure, there can be differences. And that's also the same with storm surge too. But there's a lot going on. It's going to stay out to sea? Andy Rowe, I will wager you on that one. So before you make statements like that, will it hit Virginia? If we get anything in Virginia, it'll be the remnant range. No, the concern is Florida right now. Is it possible it could drift up toward Georgia? Yeah, but it's looking less likely. Looks like that subtropical ridge is strong enough that it's going to push it to the west. So as we look at the track, and this has been pretty consistent the last couple of days, by Sunday morning, you notice it toward the northern Bahamas. And I just want to look up at a map here. So give me 1 second. I'm multitasking, not to be rude to you, but there's a lot of new information coming in. So when we look at this information, like in the Bahamas, and I've been to the Bahamas, nice place. However, my geography is a little bit weak. All right, so that is Great Abaco Island and Grand Bahama. So Great Abaco, we're just off of it, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. That would be Sunday morning. If it passes north, that's better than south because the right side of the track is the stronger side of the track. The forward winds combined with the direction of the storm tend to aid worse weather on the right side of the storm. After that, this is not really much of a difference in positioning on the cone and the track from the 5 a.m. advisory. Still looking around that Vero Beach, Fort Pierce. I've seen modeling like the Euro, for example, and down toward Jupiter or Palm Beach even. We've seen some trying to go even farther south. So the GFS was farther north up toward the Kennedy Space Center. If you remember the other day, the GFS was way north. So, when you've got that range, and Hurricane Center will tell you, their 5-day margin of error is about 200 miles. So we got a lot of time to watch things and where it's going to go. Plenty of time to prepare. You're right. You've got today, tomorrow, Saturday, Sunday. So if you have interests, relatives, whatever, concerns in Florida, you need to take this seriously. I hate to say this, but this storm will kill people. It will break things, because there will be people who will not heed the warnings. There will be people who will think, oh, I've ridden out a storm before. I know people who were in Hurricane Andrew in '92 in Homestead. A trainer I used to work with, he was a kid. His parents made that decision. He will never, ever want to do that again in his life. He feels lucky to be alive, and obviously that was his parents' choice. So the latest forecast, and again, this is a forecast. Things will change a little bit here. But when we have a major hurricane forecast to hit a fairly populated area in the U.S., you know, it's catastrophic. We're talking services could be knocked out in some cases for weeks, loss of life, flooding from storm surge, flooding from rainfall. Let's keep going with the forecast track. So when it gets over land, it loses the fuel, the warm water. Florida, though, sometimes, because it's flat, may not slow the storm down as quickly as others. But the forecast has it down to minimal hurricane strength here Tuesday morning south of Orlando, east of Tampa. Looks like on the east or south side of Route 4 there. And that's what we're looking at. All right, I wanted to show you the spaghetti plots here, the latest modeling we have. And one of the problems we had when the storm was over toward St. Lucia and Barbados was that the initialization of where the storm was crap, putting it bluntly. It just stunk. So all the modeling was south of where the actual center was, so the forecast based on the bad, you know, garbage in, garbage out. So that's what we're getting away from. Will it vary away from Central Florida, and it's getting stronger? Yeah, well, water temperatures in the mid to upper 80s, right, in the Atlantic there. There's plenty of warm water for this thing to feed. There's all sorts of reasons why this is likely to get to be a very strong, dangerous killer hurricane. You asked about Orlando, Courtney. Even in Orlando, we could be looking at hurricane conditions. Not as bad as the coast. They don't have the storm surge, obviously, but they could be dealing with the hurricane winds. And by the way, you know, hurricanes, they've got these bands in them. Often these bands, these thunderstorms within the bands are rotating. So many times you will get these tornadoes that come in the bands around the hurricane itself. So the hurricane, imagine, is this giant, you know, for all essential purposes, EF1, EF2, maybe EF3 tornado for 30 or 40 miles, right? You've got hurricane force winds may go out anywhere from 20 to 40, 50 miles from the center, depending on the size of the storm. And a hurricane needs to have winds at 74 miles an hour to be defined a hurricane. So you get those winds potentially that far. 74 mile an hour winds, if it's only Cat 1, still break things and kill people. Imagine if it's that much stronger, the wind field's that much bigger. So you've got this broad wind field, and then the storms within the hurricane also can be tornadic, which will produce some isolated damage. I was in Louisiana in 1992 after Hurricane Andrew had hit Miami, or Homestead actually, not Miami as much, and then it was coming to Louisiana. It missed New Orleans by a good 50 miles, right? But Laplace, which is west of New Orleans, had a fatality or two in a tornado in a feeder band. So none of this is to be taken lightly. If you're in North Myrtle Beach, should you be concerned? A little bit, but my concern for North Myrtle Beach is far, far less than anybody in Florida right now. Yeah, and one of the reasons the issue, and Sandra writes, Florida's in a state of emergency. By declaring a state of emergency, that allows them to start rolling assets, you know, whether it be the National Guard or whatever their emergency management assets they need to get in position in anticipation. So what you've seen over the last few years, and it's been a good thing, is that emergency management community gets the governor to declare the state of emergency so that they can get positioned ahead of the storm. Because the sooner they're positioned, and we certainly saw the ineptitude in Hurricane Katrina from the city of New Orleans and the state of Louisiana. And Mary, sorry to pick on New Orleans since you're from there.
No,
but I think by calling it, by saying the folks in Louisiana were inept in their preparation for Katrina, I am being kind and using inept, adept, right. I'm the one who curses, not Mary, but she wants to curse right now because that's her home, and they blanked up big time.
There you go.
Blanked up big time. We'll just keep it clean for the kids, right? But seriously, yeah. As far as anybody, if you're in the lower Georgia coast, I'm a little concerned there too if it jogs north, but let's look at this modeling, right? You've got all of these models here. Look at this, right? They're all positioned in that area pretty much. From the Kennedy Space Center down to now some are getting a little bit close to Miami, right? Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach, but you still have more of a cluster. Would you tell? Yeah, sorry. Vilmer, excellent guy. He's one of our building janitors, but he's vacuuming right now. We'll shut him down. I don't need that distraction. Anyway, so you're leaving Miami on Saturday morning. That's fine, Candace. Oh, by the way, if anybody has I know somebody's going out on a cruise on Friday, right? And I said, look, the cruise ships, if they have to change the itinerary, they will. And they don't want to have their, billion-dollar ships or whatever these new ones cost. They don't want them in the storm, and they don't want their customers having an unpleasant experience by having to ride out a hurricane, right? So don't worry if you have a cruise that's leaving South Florida Friday or Saturday, even Sunday probably. Nothing's leaving later Sunday or Monday. Nassau, Bahamas, still on the cone of uncertainty. Let me go back since you're asking about that. All right.
Right there at the top of it.
So I'm gonna play the track as of the 11 a.m. advisory. The winds are still at 85, although the pressure's dropping. There's an eye wall replacement cycle, looks like it's going on, so we expect the winds to catch up to the pressure shortly. So you notice NASA's on the southern end of the cone of uncertainty, cone of concern, however you want to call it. John Morales, a meteorologist friend of mine in Miami, calls it the cone of concern. I kind of like that better than the cone of uncertainty. But that would be the cone of concern,
I like that.
right? So there we are Sunday morning. It seems to be a much greater problem there as you head much toward Abaco Island. Freeport, poor Freeport. I was in Freeport years ago on a cruise ship. Freeport is just not Nassau. Freeport does not need a hurricane. They're trying to develop and become a little bit better. So as far as the Tampa area, Tampa, and here we go. So the forecast track has that 130 miles an hour, give or take, near Vero Beach, Fort Pierce, Monday at 3:30 in the afternoon. I've seen some modeling that has it 12 hours earlier. I've seen some modeling that has it more toward Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale. Right? Just keep in mind, this is a forecast going out, 4.5 days. Things will change a little bit. But the weather pattern, the steering currents seem to be pretty locked in. So it does look like that east coast of Florida, south of Melbourne, let's say somewhere between Melbourne and Miami, if I had to guess. And the problem is, I was watching Rick Knapp a couple of years ago. He's no longer with the Hurricane Center, but he's with the Weather Channel. He was talking about evacuations. They estimate that it costs the economy $1 million per mile that they have to evacuate.
Wow.
And they really do this very carefully because they realize there's so much stress. People are so stressed. They're so anxious. And then they got to pack. And where are they going to go? And are they going to go be safe? And people have accidents. People have heart attacks. I mean, so these guys don't evacuate willy-nilly. And if people listen and they do things in an orderly way, it's about really mitigating the threat, mitigating the loss of life, mitigating the damage if you can. I don't know if you can mitigate the damage, but we can certainly take action to mitigate the loss of life. There will be loss of life. Do you have a hurricane plan if you're down there? Do you know where you can go? If you've got pets, do you know which hotels accept pets? My brother lives in Safety Harbor outside of Tampa. I posted something at 3-something this morning. He responded. I'm like, what are you doing up? And he's like, when the storm's coming, he gets a little wound up. So I think he's got a hotel in Tallahassee that he's going to bug out to. Just him and his dog. So anyway, I'm getting a little bit off the beaten path here. St. Pete, let's keep going forward here. Now, the Tampa-St. Pete area during the day on Tuesday, we don't know yet if it's going to be the circulation said it goes close to Tampa, more Fort Myers, and maybe up to Crystal River. But yeah, Tampa's got to worry about this Tuesday, Monday night, Tuesday. And if there's still a well-defined center circulation, which there probably will be, assuming it doesn't turn and go up I-75 up toward Tallahassee or Gainesville or Ocala, which is a possibility, because even the Euro, the 60, I think, 0-60 had a pretty sharp turn to the north before it made the west coast of Florida. We're still 4 or 5 days out, so a lot of things can still happen. Yes, hey, good morning from Deltona. Hey, Matthew, I'm just going over the latest track here. And right now, anyway, the center, the most likely track, takes it toward Vero and Fort Pierce, although Deltona, Daytona, Kennedy, Titusville, Melbourne, the Palm Beaches down to Fort Lauderdale really still are in that area of concern should the track shift. So, you know, you have to be in hurricane prep right now. You know, you got to have your go bag, you got to have your cash, you got to have anything you're going to need in case you have to get out of there. And I would urge everybody to potentially think that way if you are down in Florida. Waycross, Georgia, man, I got to look up exactly where Waycross is, but I think the bigger problem in Waycross, if I'm not mistaken, is going to be, yeah, you know, it's interesting. Waycross probably has maybe tropical storm conditions and rain. You're also away from the land, unless the storm comes into like Amelia Island, right, and takes a beeline for you and can hold on to that strength and structure. It's probably not as much of a concern for you in Waycross than in other areas. I'm just trying to get your questions. Will it hit St. Pete? Some of it may hit St. Pete. Remember, the storm is not one singular point. Even though that center is over toward Vero Beach and Fort Pierce, you could have hurricane force winds, 20, 30, 40 miles from the center maybe. You could have tropical storm force winds, could be 100 or 200 miles. You could have tornadoes and feeder bands, flooding rain, storm surge. So it's not a singular point on a map. So to say, will it hit, I think the question is, what type of hit will it take, more so than will it hit? And these fine details, 4.5 days out, are still fuzzy. I always like to use the golf analogy, right? You got a par 4, you're at the tee box. The odds of you getting the hole-in-one are slim to none, right? But if you're on the edge of the green or you're a 10-foot putt, let's say, you may sink that. So the closer we get to landfall, the finer these details will come, or the more they'll come into focus. So that's how I look at it there. Yeah, yes, Marianne cruise ships have changed itineraries. Thanks, Will. Going to get windy. Yep. What else we got going on? Does anyone know if it'll hit anywhere near Orlando? Yes, it will hit. I mean, a portion of the storm will definitely affect Orlando, right? Orlando, with the latest forecast, is just a little bit north of the track. That's not a good place to be Tuesday morning. So I would imagine schools Monday and Tuesday, and a good chunk of Florida will be out, and depending on where it really hits, school may be out for a week or two or longer. It just depends on how much damage. A Cat 4 storm, right? Really, really bad. I can't stress this enough. This will do a lot of damage. This will leave long-term service interruptions, potentially for weeks in spots. Yeah, weeks. It's no joke. Weeks. I don't know where Wellington, Florida is. Let me look it up. Give me a second. And you know, Wellington is on the East Coast, just west of Palm Beach. Yeah, I'd be nervous if I was in Wellington. Hope the storm goes a little farther north, but some of the models have it a little bit closer to you. So yeah, Wellington, Florida, you need to have whatever hurricane plan you have, you need to start to get it enacted. Start thinking about, I'd fill up my car. I'd get extra gasoline if you got any containers. I wouldn't wait. I'd fill up my car today and I would keep it full. I'd fill it up every chance I get between now and the storm hit. You got some of those 5-gallon or 10-gallon, maybe 5 gallons, a few 5-gallon jugs of gas in case you got to get out. You know, you don't want to be stopping at a gas station or waiting 3 hours in a line and maybe them running out, right? You got to think ahead. Get a few $100s in cash, you know. Right. New Jersey. Hello, New Jersey. Not a problem for New Jersey. You live in Hudson, Florida. Well, my knowledge of Florida is going to go up big time. Let me find out where Hudson is. Are you in danger? Hudson, Florida, by the way, is north of Tampa. All right. Not as much danger as folks on the East Coast, although there is potential for some tropical storm or weak hurricane conditions for you, depending on the exact track. So in Hudson, I clearly would watch it. If the storm goes to your north, it could, if the storm, let's say the circulation passes to your north, then you could get into some onshore flow. That could have some flooding issues, but I'm not as concerned on the West Coast as I am, for obvious reasons, on the East Coast of Florida. Let's get back to any questions. Cocoa Beach, if this track holds, should we head southwest instead of northwest? No, if I'm in Cocoa Beach, I'd be thinking I would go north instead of south right now. I think the odds, as the way it looks today, the odds of the storm going north are less than the odds of the storm going south. Now, talk to me tomorrow. I may have a different answer, but if you hold the gun to my head and I have to give you one today, if I'm in Cocoa, I'm going to head north, not south. All right. Hey, Todd, good morning. Lake Placid, Florida. I've seen that. I just don't know where. So I appreciate your patience, ladies and gentlemen. All right, Lake Placid. Yeah, your bigger problem there, obviously, they're northwest of Okeechobee, south of Winter Haven, right in the middle, smack dab. You get some freshwater flooding if the rains are heavy enough, so you've got all those lakes near you. So you could certainly get some flooding from that, along with whatever potential wind damage may come along. But the storm surge is not an issue for you. Yeah, you clearly still have, if you're lucky, no issues. If not, I need you to be prepared. Anywhere near Port Orange. Oh, this is fantastic. I am learning geography, Mary. More geography. So Port Orange is south of Daytona, just north of the Kennedy, north of the Kennedy Space Center by, about 15, 20 miles. You have to pay attention. You clearly are still in the cone of uncertainty, cone of concern, as we're talking about. So yeah, you have to. Is it coming to Maryland? No, if we get anything out of this in Maryland, it'll be some remnant showers and storms, maybe mid to latter part of next week. Yeah. Yes, Troy Jackson, well put. Some will see some. Most of the state of Florida will see some effects from the storm. It's possible those areas in western Florida should make the turn sooner and not get toward the Gulf, where it might not be too bad in places like Apalachicola, Pensacola, Fort Walton, the Mexico Beach, the people who are still trying to recover from last year. Or was it 2 years now? Yeah, they're still trying to recover. Let me see. Outer Banks, probably not. Eleanor, the Outer Banks would be sort of on the north end of the low end of probabilities. So, yeah, St. Augustine has to worry. Orlando has to worry. Southwest Georgia in trouble? Probably not. Cliff, the worst case for Southwest Georgia is it goes into the Gulf, it re-strengthens, it makes a second landfall somewhere around Apalachicola, Big Bend, and then moves north with some wind and flooding rains. That would be the worst case for Southwest Georgia. Charleston, probably okay. I'm not too concerned about Charleston, Myrtle Beach, those areas, unless the track changes drastically. But really, a lot of the modeling now is focusing in on that southeastern Florida, maybe that central East Coast, anywhere from Melbourne, Kennedy Space Center down to Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach even, I think are still in play. I wouldn't discount the probability of this shifting south or north. I think south is a little bit more likely than north, but that's my thinking this morning. No one knows the whole state will be affected. Well, Ruth, I don't know about no one knows. I mean, we've got a pretty good idea about what the storm can do. There will be storm surge flooding. You get a Cat 4, you can get a storm surge, I think, 10, 15 feet, if I'm not mistaken. And that's just the storm surge. You get waves on top of that, and you can understand why the coastal areas are going to see a lot of damage. Then you throw tornadic thunderstorms, you throw, 6, 12 inches of rain, maybe more depending on the forward speed of the storm. Yeah, it's just, there are a lot of ways there are a lot of ways to die, to be frank about it, in a hurricane. So when you see the emergency managers get up there, and I know the governor will get up and they'll say what they'll say, and it's somewhat of a dog and pony show, and they got to get their face out. But, if you can get past some of that, the message of safety and of how life-threatening this is should not be lost on the political posturing sometimes that does seem to take place on when we have events like this. Florida State is moving their game Saturday to Tallahassee. Where was it supposed to be played? Well, I wasn't sure. Fort Lauderdale, yeah, Susan, Fort Lauderdale is still potentially a problem for them should the track shift a little farther south. Right now, if this track holds, Fort Lauderdale sees some impact, but they're far enough away from the center that it shouldn't be too great. Looks like the eye wall has reformed on IR. Yeah, well, that's right. Will's talking about the eye wall. It was 5 nautical miles. Then there's one at 25, so it's going through an eye wall replacement cycle. The pressure's dropped to 986. It was 991 this morning. at the 5 a.m. advisory, and a lower pressure, stronger storm. But when we go through an eye wall replacement cycle, the winds haven't yet translated yet to match the pressure. It's just a matter of time and catching up. So, thanks, James. You live in Boynton Beach. Richard, pay attention, have a plan. You may have to evacuate. I hope not. I hope the storm stays north of you. But the Outer Banks look to have minimal impact, Rachel, minimal impact. You're from D.C., should drive out of Florida now? Nah, it's Thursday, right? I think the big exodus is Sunday. Richard, I'd probably wait another day. You might be okay Saturday morning, but by then it just, let's face it, I-95, the Florida Turnpike, 75, it's going to be a cluster. It's just going to be a slow slog. Or if you leave, let's say you leave Saturday, I'd leave at like 1 or 2 a.m., right? Probably the big rush, and if there are any Floridians who can chime in, if the storm's expected to hit midday Monday, do people leave Sunday? Do they leave Saturday? I mean, how much lead time before people start to bug out? Does the real panic start to ensue? You should leave by Saturday. Thanks, Sarah. Is it coming to Polk County? Some of it. South of Tampa. Yeah, look, it all depends on where exactly the center goes, but Polk County, Tampa, you're going to see some impact from Dorian. But as you're a little bit farther west, it's still a little unknown exactly the impact there because a lot depends on the exact track. The threat obviously is far, far greater on the East Coast than the West Coast, but even the circulation well west, well away from the center, these feeder bands, the thunderstorms can produce tornadoes. So it's just another thing to consider, another thing to wonder about. Yes, Tallahassee will at least see some rain and wind out of this. Key West probably not too bad. Right now they're still on that cone of concern, but the way it's looking now, probably not too bad. A couple days out, says Lori, thanks. Naples also probably not too bad. That's okay, Betty. Have family in Ocala. Should they leave? Tough call. With Ocala, the bigger concern is, depending on the exact track, of course, would be some rains, some wind, power outages. I mean, how sturdy is their house? Do they have a good place? Do they have supplies in case the power's out for several days? Do they have a generator? Do they have fuel for the generator? My brother lives in Safety Harbor outside of Tampa, and he's going to leave, more than likely. He's already got a hotel room, I think, for Monday night. Hi, Chesapeake Beach. Yeah, no concern whatsoever. Okeechobee. Yeah, Okeechobee. Look, I've been looking at some modeling that's hinting more toward Jupiter or Palm Beach even. So if that happens, this thing will go right toward Okeechobee. And if that happens, Okeechobee's a warm body of water, right? It could help sustain the storm a little longer. Sometimes we call it the brown ocean. Parts of South Florida, especially when storms go over the Everglades, there's so much warm water coming into it. It's like it's still over open water sometimes. You get north of the Everglades in Okeechobee, you don't have that heat, that hot water feeding the system, fueling the system. So, yeah. Should Pensacola worry? Not too much yet. I'd watch it if I'm in Pensacola, but I'm not too worried. Ocala's fine. Yeah, Mike, probably. But, yeah. Right. Becky, you just got to watch Okeechobee. If the storm stays north and east of you on this track, you're okay. If it starts to drift closer to Okeechobee, there are going to be problems. It's still better than being on the coast, I think, but there are going to be problems. All right, guys, look, it's been a while, but about half an hour, 29 minutes and change. That is the latest. Let me just recap before I go, because I'm in overtime today myself. So Hurricane Dorian on the 11 o'clock advisory had winds of 85 gusting to 105. We have moving at 13 miles an hour. That really hasn't changed since this morning. The pressure's dropping, and a little tough to see because the icon's there, but there's an eye now, and it's sort of going through what's called an eye wall replacement cycle, where we've got two eyes, and eventually the outer one takes over. But this thing will strengthen. Hurricane Center has it strengthening later today, up to 100 miles an hour at 8 p.m., then to a Cat 3 as we head toward tomorrow, major hurricane, then to a Cat 4 Sunday morning, And they think that intensity, 130-ish, give or take. I mean, they'll even be the first one to tell you that sometimes intensity forecasts are still very difficult things to do. It's easier to see the steering currents than it is to try to figure out the total intensity on that. With that being said, that cone goes from Jacksonville down to about, I don't know if it's going to Key West anymore, maybe more so. Can I widen it? Oh, there we can go. All right, see, Key West isn't even in it, and Jacksonville's on the northern edge of that, the cone of concern, right? But as we zoom in even more, you can see just about Vero Beach Monday at 3 o'clock. This is a forecast, not the gospel, but they've been doing a pretty good job here, and the models are pretty much in agreement as far as where it's going. And oh, speaking of the models, hey, look at that. We can take a look at those as well. And you see this tight clustering. It starts to diverge a little bit, though, as we head toward Florida. Notice you've got some members down toward Fort Lauderdale, right? Aventura, maybe. Plantation. On the north end, it seems like the Kennedy Space Center on the north end. So you got a bunch up Fort Pierce to Kennedy Space Center, then some more toward Jupiter and even Lake Okeechobee. So this is the concern. So this is kind of made these this morning. I don't see any reason to change this. Dorian expected. Oh, except for the typo in expected. Shame on me. Dorian's expected to make landfall Monday morning, maybe Monday afternoon. I may have to change that. I can't. I hate typos. I had an extra E in expected. All right. I will just say expected to make landfall Monday, because it still could be Monday afternoon. And rain from Dorian is possible. DMV, for anybody watching, we say that for District, Maryland, and Virginia. So it's sort of a local thing we call our region, the DMV. Not the Department of Motor Vehicles, but the District, Maryland, and Virginia. All right, let me see a few more comments before we go. New Smyrna, is that Georgia? Should you cancel St. Petersburg for Sunday? I don't know, Mary Jo. Where are you? What's your plan there? I mean, Sunday in St. Petersburg should be a nice day. This will hit Monday afternoon the way it's looking now. So Monday into Tuesday is when St. Pete goes, but Sunday looks fine in St. Petersburg. Will it hit the Carolinas? Probably not. I mean, maybe some rain, but as far as the damaging hit, no. I don't see that at this time. So, hi, Denise. Hey, Denise, I'm just wrapping this up, but to just put it one more time, we're looking at Hurricane Dorian's 11 a.m. advisory headed toward areas potentially as a Cat 4 hurricane. Monday, 3 o'clock, you'll notice it around the Vero Beach, Fort Pierce area. However, there's a lot of time and things can change some, so certainly we have to watch that. But that is just the very latest. And yes, it might become Cat 4. Vicki, don't worry about Myrtle Beach next week. Have fun, eat well, and put on the sunscreen. All right, that is it for today. I thank you for your time. I hope I've been able to answer a bunch of your questions. I'm sorry that I could not get to everybody, but when we have a few hundred people in the room, it's just an impossibility. We've got more updates, more info coming up at noon. Mary Marshall will have the latest in WSA 9 News at noon, which you can also watch online or on the app for that matter. We've got separate stories dealing with Dorian in and of itself. We've got extra crews that we're sending down to assist our Tegna stations on their coverage as we get in toward the arrival of Hurricane Dorian, expected Labor Day, somewhere on the east coast of Florida. Looks like somewhere between Miami and maybe Melbourne, the Kennedy Space Center. But right now, that Vero Beach, Fort Pierce is more focused, let's say, than other areas. So that is it for now. Be well, be safe, and seriously, if you're down in Florida, this is a life-threatening storm. Okay, I'll say it one more time, a life-threatening storm. You need to take this seriously. We will talk to you soon. Be safe.